Have you ever asked yourself, how do you manage the risk cycle in a project environment? Don't worry, in this video, I'm going to take you through all that you need for you to understand and appreciate and also implement the risk cycle in your current project or even in your future projects. Whether a project manager, program manager, or project member, this video is for you. You need to understand the risk cycle in a project environment. So let's get started. Hello and welcome to my channel. My name is Oscar Mbira. I'm a certified program and project manager. In this video, I'm going to take you through the risk cycle in a project environment. So let's get started. I hope you have enjoyed the video so far. If you are new to the channel, don't forget to click the like button, subscribe button, and the notification button so that you're the first person to be notified each time a new video is uploaded on this channel. So, in order for you to appreciate what is risk cycle, I'm going to take you through all the stages that you require for you to understand and also appreciate a risk cycle. So, in this video, we are covering about 6 stages of the risk cycle. So, the first stage is going to be the identification. Second stage is going to be evaluation or assessment. The third stage is going to be on identifying the responses to risks. The fourth one is going to be selecting the responses to end risks. Then the fifth one is going to be planning and also resourcing for that risk. Then the last one, but not least, is also implementation and also monitoring of the risk. We are also going to include communication. Throughout all these stages, communication is very important. Then at the end, we report about the risk. So let's move on. So in this section, I'm going to cover the risk identification process. As part of a risk identification process, we're going to go through what is required, what processes are needed, what activities are needed for you to complete the risk identification. So I'm going to have a combination of 2 things. The first one is I'll show you on the screen. The second one I'm going to show you on a diagrammatical way so that at least you can appreciate how it all goes in terms of risk identification. So there are several ways to identify a risk, and I'm not going to cover them in this video, otherwise it's going to be a very long video which might defeat the intention of this video, which is to summarize the risk cycle. So I'm going to take you through what I consider to be the best for you to come up with identification of risks. So the first thing that you need to do is to be able to categorize these risks. If you want to learn more about risk categories, I've also done a video which you can check on my channel. It is rich in terms of how do you categorize risks in a project. So in this video, I'm going to cover what is called pastel in risk categorization. So what do we mean by pastel? I'm going to take you through what it means in terms of these abbreviations. So the first one is P will stand for political. So when you're identifying risks, just make sure that you also consider the political environment. These environments are normally volatile, which means they can change anytime, and therefore it might also affect your current project. So you need to consider the category of political environment. Then the second item is on economic or economical, okay? So economical effect might also affect your project. I'll give you a good example. Assuming you were creating a product which were supposed to make available to the market, maybe due to either inflation issues or taxation issues or even any financial act that might be either created or implemented during the project, you might find it no longer viable for you to continue with that project. So if you had not done a proper risk analysis towards that area, once that happens, it's most likely that your project is going to be affected and you might not even achieve what you intended to achieve within that project in terms of objectives and also in terms of goals. So it is very apparent to you as a project member or project manager to make sure that you also have a category to assess the economical situation within the project or within your country, within your industry, or within the project type. That is very important and is going to save you a lot in terms of preparation, in terms of plan A, in terms of plan B. So you need to make sure that the economical side of it is well documented, all the risks are identified, and so on and so forth. Then the third one is social or sociological category. So categorizing your risks into sociological or social category is very important, especially if you're running a project that is well connected to the social environment. For example, it's connected to migration of people, it's even connected to demographics and so on and so forth. So you need to be able to say, in this category, what can go wrong socially? If you're able to identify those items, you find it very easy to manage the project because you're identifying the risks from the beginning of the project. You monitor, you manage all the way, including mitigation, all the way up to the closure of the project. So that is very, very important for you to know as a project manager or project member, that you need to analyze exactly what social effects, what social events, what social implications, what social risks can exist in my project. Once you identify those items, document them in the risk register. If you want to understand more about risk register, I've also done another video on risk register. You can also check it on my channel. It's one of the most important tools that you must have in a project environment. So let's move on. The next one is technology or technological. So technological category is very important. I've seen some projects which were very much affected by technology. Just to make the matter simple, I'll give you a simple example. Say you're using a specific software and you have not upgraded that software for a long time. The owner or the supplier of that software might give you some dates to say, if you don't upgrade by this particular day or date, then the system either is going to stop working or you're not going to get support. So imagine you're running a project where probably you're developing a small software that has got a dependence on that software which is not yet upgraded. And maybe for some reasons, it could be financial, you're not going to make it by that date. So that technology will no longer be helpful to you, okay? So it is very important that you use the right technology at that particular time. You are always checking the risks of that particular technology when you're running the project. That is very important. Imagine you're using a certain machine that is going to be outdated in a 2, 3, or 4 years to come. Then definitely that is going to affect how you're going to deliver the project. So it is quite important that you consider the technological environment, you consider the technological setups, you consider the technological capabilities, and then identify the risks around that as a project member or project manager. And then you make sure that all is aligned, and you also make sure all the mitigations, they are done. I've also created a downloadable free checklist or template that you can use for risk identification, assessment, and also planning. You can check it in the description below this video. Then the next one is the legal. So the legal environment is also very important for you to consider when you're identifying risks in a project. Remember, the objective here is to identify any associated risks with the project. So the legal environment is also important. Say, for example, you are working on a product that is going to be used to spray, for example, pests. As a project, you want to produce that product. And then probably in about 2 or 3 months after you've started the product, probably there is now a legal obligation that you must make sure everything is protected, the security, the environment, the animals, the insects. So imagine if you had not considered the legal environment, you are most likely going to be affected. It might even affect the project, it might even affect the output of the project. So understanding the legal framework, the legal environment, based on the type of project you're working on, based on the industry of the project you're working on, also based on the product you expect to produce from that project. That is very important, and you must master it as a project manager and also as a project member. The other categorization you need to do when you're identifying these risks is the environment. So the environment is very important. These days, the environment is very important. For example, you might be working on a product that is going to be used, say for example, mining. And after the use of that product, there is no way to recover probably the area in which the mining people were working on. You find it very difficult in most environments that you won't be able to continue operating, or you might not be even given the license to operate if you don't consider the after effects of your chemical product. So it is also very important to understand what is the risk that can come with the environment. For example, we are working on a construction of a bridge as a project. And you know the area you are constructing the bridge either is prone to floods or even earthquakes or even bad weather in general. So if you don't consider the risks associated with the environment, it will be very, very difficult for you to manage the project going forward. So you need to understand also the surrounding environment, where the project is being operated, where the project is also being implemented. That is very important for you to note as a program manager, project manager, or even project member. So in terms of risk identification, you are now done with your categories, which is a plus, and that is good to do. The next stage now is to be able to describe the risks. I've seen so many project managers, so many program managers, even project members making a mistake on understanding what is a risk. How do you define a risk? In most cases, you ask someone, what is the risk here? They will tell you project will be delayed. You go again, you ask another one, even senior project managers, what is the risk here? There's going to be budget overrun. I'm telling you, that is not the best way to describe a risk. If you also want to understand more in terms of how to describe a risk, I've also done a video on how to describe a risk in terms of cause, event, and effect. So, identification of a risk is very important. Categorizing it into PESTEL, which is political, economical, technological, social, is also very important. But describing the risk also is also important. So you need to be able to describe the risk in terms of 3 stages or 3 phases. First one is the cause. You should be able to describe the risk, what is causing the risk, and then also the event, which is the actual risk. What is going to happen if the cause materializes? Then you also need to describe the impact or the effect. What is going to be the effect if the risk is going to materialize? So that is very, very important. So in terms of describing the risks, so many people use, can I say, shapes to do that. Normally, the triangle is used for showing the cause. And then the rectangle is also used to show the event. And then a circle is now used to show the impact, like this. You see the way you are seeing it on the screen. So it is very, very important when you are a project member or project manager that you are able to distinguish the 3 items: cause, event, and impact. And then you should be able to show that in a diagrammatical way, like what you are seeing on the screen. So the advantage of doing this is you are very clear on what is going to cause the risk. So you work more on plan B, either to mitigate or even to avoid or to stop that risk from happening. So that is also very critical and very important to you to appreciate. If this is the cause of the risk, and this is the event, and this is the impact, how can I minimize the cause of the risk? For example, you might identify a risk that you have a very key project member. You know, I've been in some projects where you have very important or very key project members. You disturb those ones, the project is going to shake. So you have identified that you have a very key project member. What is going to cause the project member to leave? Probably it might be the package. Okay? So once the project member, the key project member is left the project, most likely you are going to have either poor quality or even a delayed delivery of the project. I've seen some projects with 2 people or 2 resources, some with 3 or 5. But if one of them decides to leave the project will suffer. So after knowing the cause, as a project manager or as a project member, that is the time now we need to start working on the mitigations. That is the way to reduce the impact of that. For example, you might have someone to understand what the key member is doing, or you can have someone to be paired with what the senior member is doing or the skilled member is doing. In case the skilled member leaves, at least the project can continue. So that is very, very important for you to identify those types of risks. And then you identify the cause, the event, and also the implication. So that is still part of risk identification, and it's quite important to master that. I hope you have enjoyed the video so far. If you are new to the channel, don't forget to click the like button, subscribe button, and the notification button so that you are the first person to be notified each time a new video is uploaded on this channel. So now, let us move on to the next part of the cycle, which is assessment and evaluation of the risk. So this is one of the very important steps in the risk cycle. You also need to assess the risk. There are so many ways to assess the risk. Normally classified by three, parameters. So the first parameter is the probability, which is the chances or the likelihood of the risk to occur. So that is also very important when identifying a risk. We have identified a specific risk. Now we want to understand how likely is it going to happen. We're going to go deeper, more into probability as we go through the video. So the second one also is the impact. You should be able to assess the impact of the risk. That is quite important. Assessment of the impact can also help you either to increase or reduce your risk appetite. Say, for example, you want to be low or medium, for example. If the impact is going to be high, obviously your risk appetite is also going to be decided based on that. Then the third one is proximity. So proximity is how close is the risk in a project. It could be as close as 2 weeks, it could be as close as 1 month or 1 year, or it could be as close as the next stage of the project. So these are the three main parameters that you need to understand when you are also identifying a risk. So let's go through them one by one and then understand what it means. So now let us move on to the next part of the cycle, which is assessment and evaluation of the risk. So this is one of the very important steps in the risk cycle. You also need to assess the risk. There are so many ways to assess the risk. So the first one is probability. So probability normally ranges from 0 to 1. If it's 0, it means that risk is never going to happen. If it's 1, it means certainly that risk is going to happen. So it ranges from 0 to 1. Say, for example, based on your experience, based on even gut feeling, you decided that this risk's chance of happening is 0.7%. The chance of happening is 0.7. So what it means is there's a 70% chance that that risk is going to occur. So the probability of that risk to occur is 70%. So based on the probability, you can now make a judgment. And how do you mitigate? How do you make things better? How do you avoid the cause of the risk? So that is also very important to be able to identify a risk, assign the probability of it to happen. The second one is the impact. What I've seen in most of my experience as a project manager is the impact is normally rated from high, very high, low, medium, and so on and so forth. However, the recommendation from best practice is to put it on a scale of, say, 1 to 5. Minimum number or categories for a risk is about 5, and it ranges between 5 and 10. You need to take note of that. So it normally ranges from 1 to 5. 1, it means it's a low risk. Then 5, it means it's a high impact risk. So 1, it means it's a low impact risk. 5, it means it's a high impact risk. So you find using this scale, there's also the same scale. Probability also has the same scale of 1 to 5. So what it means is you are rating based on the actual probability, 75%, for example. You might say 70% is 1, which means it's a low probability. 80 is 4, it's a high probability, and so on and so forth. So you can also scale the probability from 1 to 5, which means 1, high chance of being of occurring. Number 5, which means high, it's low chance of occurring. Number 5 is high chance of occurring. So that is also very important for probability. Then you might be asking, all this information, how do we represent it? Remember, we went through the categorization, the PESTO that we're talking about, the categorization of risks. So from my experience, what I normally do is for each and every risk, I create what is called a PI grid, or probability impact grid, like the one you're seeing on the screen. So I'll take you through quickly what it means. So on the left side, you see there's a probability, which is also having the scale of 0 to 5. And then to the right, which is the y-axis, we also have the impact. So the reason or the main purpose of using this PI grid is to be able to plot your categories within this PI grid. I'm telling you, I've been in projects where the project board, they will always tell you that when a risk moves from one category to the other, within these boxes, you can see the one which is demarcated in blue. So the upper right corner is high risk, and then the lower left corner is low risk. So the main purpose of this is, as you run the project from the beginning all the way up to the end, the risks are going to be moving from one bucket to the other, depending on the situation. So what I normally do is I create this PI grid, and then each and every reporting period, say for example, after end of stage or phase, or weekly or monthly, I also revisit my PI grid to make sure that all the risks, they are also being represented and they are moving from one bucket to the other the right way. So my advice is always identify between 5 to 10 major risks. Then you give them numbers, 1 to 10. Now using 1 to 10, using the number 1 to 10, you can now take it on your probability impact or PI grid. And then using this probability impact grid, you start putting them into the right areas. Say for example, if you look at risk number 3, or even risk number 6, we also have risk number 4, 2, and also 1, and then 5. So if you look at risk number 3, this has got a low impact and a low probability. So how do we get the actual figure from here? You multiply the probability times the impact, and then it gives you a scale of its impact. Say for example, if I take risk number 3, it is 1 times 1, so which is 1. Then if I take risk number 5, which is also 1 times 5, which is 5. So you might be asking, Oscar, what are these numbers for? Okay, so when you multiply probability and impact, it gives you how high the risk is, and also it gives you the scale in terms of assessing what you should do with that risk. The higher the number, the higher the risk and the impact. The lower the number, the lower the risk and impact. But my advice is you need to be very careful. There are some cases where probably the probability is 1, as an example, like what we've seen on risk number 3. Probability is 1, but the impact is very high, okay? You can also see it on risk number 5. The probability is 1, the probability is very low, but the impact is very high. If you look at risk number 6, you can see that the impact is very low, but the probability is very high. So as a project manager or project member, it is very important for you to understand and appreciate these risk scales from a PI grid. It can help you to create mitigating factors. For example, you start looking at plan A or plan B. If I take an example of risk number 6, the probability is very high, which means most likely that risk is going to occur, but the impact is very low. So you can now start working on how do I minimize the probability, or what is going to be my risk response to that specific risk. So that is very important, and it is very important to understand this PI grid. If you want me to do a specific video for this probability impact grid, let me know in the comment section below. So in order to appreciate the risk assessment and evaluation, I've seen so many project managers, even myself included, they use what is called Ishikawa diagram or fishbone diagram, as you can see it here. It represents, or it looks like a fishbone. So we have already discussed the categories. So what you need to do now is the main primary fishbone, you put it as a category like so, as you can see on number 2. And then the rest of the other cause and also the effects, you put them at the small bones on the fish, like what you can see on item number 3. So this is how you might also want to analyze and assist in terms of analyzing the risk, cause, effect, and also event. So the third part of the cycle is also identifying how to respond to specific risks. I can tell you from my experience, you are always going to have some risks materializing. And once they materialize, it means it's now an issue. You need to respond to that. So there are so many ways to respond to risks. I normally call them as raft. And if you want to go deeper into understanding how do you respond to specific risks, I've also done a video on risk responses. You can also check it on my channel. I can't go through them in this video, otherwise it's going to be very, very long. So there are so many ways you can respond to risks. For example, you can avoid it. You can even transfer if you want. You can even accept. There are certain circumstances you just have to accept because there's nothing that you can do for you to move forward. So these risk responses are very important. So when you have identified your risk, you have done the evaluation, you have done the assessment, now you need to identify how am I going to respond to that specific risk in case it materializes. That is very, very important. So you might say, for these specific risks, because I don't have any control, I will accept. Then for this specific risk in the project, because it's too much, either for the organization or for the project, then you want to share it with other projects in the organization or other projects outside the organization. So that is also very, very important when you're doing the risk cycle process. Be able to identify and also document the risk responses for each and every risk that you have identified in this cycle. I've seen so many organizations, they also have their own risk responses based on either their procedures or past experience, or even their industry of operation, their type of business models, and so on and so forth. So if you're a project manager or you're a project member, it is also very important that you align yourself with the organization's project or risk responses. That is very, very important. You don't want to see yourself doing something extraordinary when there are only maybe specific laid down procedures that you are supposed to follow when you want to respond to specific risks. So that is very important to consider also. You need to be very careful in how you respond to some of these risks. In some cases, as an organization, they might not accept that kind of response. So that coordination within the organization, project environment, project stakeholders, is very important for you to appreciate what needs to be done when a specific risk is materialized. Do you have to escalate? Do you have to make a decision? Do you have to stop a project? Do you have to transfer it? Do you have to avoid it? So it's very important that you also consider the same. So the next stage is to do with selecting the responses. Remember, you have identified the possible responses that you can have to the risk. Now you need to select which one are you going to take, and it has to be based on the organizational guidance or guidelines that you have when you're running that project. The next stage now is, the next stage of the cycle is to plan and resource for that risk. This is quite important. I've seen so many project managers making that mistake. They just identify the risks, then that's it. That is a big mistake. You now need to plan for that risk and also make sure the available resources, they do exist in case that risk happens or occurs. You might be asking, Oscar, why should I be worried? I'm telling you, if you have done many projects like me, there are certain projects, if you had not planned and resourced for the risk, you'll be in trouble. The other day, I was running a banking project, and in this banking project, there was an issue to do with budget, which means it was under budgeted. They thought the number of resources that were going to work on the project were, say, for example, 30, which was actually even less than 70% of what was expected. Then at the end of the day, it was very clear that the project was not going to be delivered until we add resources, okay? So the risk of availability of resources had occurred, and that was going to affect the project. If you want to understand more about that project, I've also done a video on the banking project that I helped to salvage, which was almost going to a stoppage or early exit. You can also check it on my channel. There's a lot to learn from there. So that is also very important to make sure you plan for the risk, you also resource. If it doesn't happen, then fair and fine. You bring back the resources, but if it happens, at least you've prepared. Risk management is all about preparing for the uncertainty. Once you are done with that preparation, it makes life very easy. Then, the next stage of the cycle is implementation. Please listen to me. I've been requested to salvage some projects which were almost going to stoppage or to be disbanded. And one of the items I've identified, which was very common in most of those projects, is the implementation of the risks that have been identified. Remember, we are going through our process of the cycle. We identify, we assess, we evaluate, we select the response, we also plan and resource. Now, the very important point to do is to implement. If you don't implement that, you are going to find it very, very difficult to achieve in a project. So whatever you've identified, whatever responses, whatever plan that you have came up with, whatever resources that you have also allocated as a mitigation to that risk, there must be some implementation if it happens. I've also created a downloadable free checklist or template that you can use for risk identification, assessment, and also planning. You can check it in the description below this video. If you want me to create additional videos based on what we have discussed throughout this video, you can reach out to me or you can let me know in the comment section below. Thank you for watching.